Chapter 3. My addictions were trying to protect me. The rain on the windshield blurred the streetlights into long liquid ribbons, as if the city itself was crying. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to this world. I wasn't sure if I was driving away from something or straight into it. The hum of the engine wasn't just white noise, it was a confession booth. Every mile seemed to whisper memories I'd tried to bury. I wasn't in this car. I was in 100 other moments at once. My chest felt tight, not from the cold, but from the familiar weight of knowing exactly where this road could lead, and remembering that I'd once called it home. I slowed at an intersection, not because of traffic, but because I recognized the street sign. My stomach tightened. It was the street I swore I'd never drive down again. The place where, years ago, I'd been on a different mission, in a different body, with a different soul. Back then, I wasn't searching for healing. I was searching for the next relief. My eyes caught the flicker of a convenience store neon light, the same one that used to buzz in the background while I waited for a dealer to show up. It was almost like that light was blinking at me, saying, "Remember? Remember how easy it was to disappear here?" And I did remember. But I also remembered something else. I didn't have a drug problem. I had a pain problem. That line didn't come to me as an epiphany in some therapist's office years later. It was already there, hiding in me, even back then. Because deep down, I'd always known that I wasn't chasing a high. I was chasing an off switch. When I was young, no one taught me how to sit with heartbreak without breaking apart myself. No one taught me how to tell the difference between grief and shame. They both just felt like drowning. No one ever sat me down and said, "When panic takes over, here's how to breathe through it." Instead, I learned to carry it all inside like a room I couldn't leave. So when I found something, anything, that could dim the lights in that room, I took it. And for a moment, the air felt lighter. The noise faded. My chest unclenched. It wasn't about joy. I'd stopped expecting joy. It was about the quiet that came when the storm went still. The first time I felt that quiet, it was like meeting someone who understood me without asking a single question. That's what addiction was at first. A friend who didn't flinch when I cried, who didn't demand explanations, who didn't judge the mess I was. It didn't care how ugly my pain was. It just sat there, offering numbness like a warm blanket. But as I sat at that red light, watching the rain turn the street into a mirror, I realized the truth. The friend had turned into a jailer, and the blanket had become a rope. I thought about the first time I noticed that shift. It wasn't in some dramatic, movie-worthy overdose scene. It was quieter, more humiliating. I was lying on a bed, sweat soaking through my shirt, skin crawling like it wanted to crawl off my bones. My phone was on the floor, buzzing with calls I couldn't answer because I didn't have the energy to lie one more time. That was the moment I saw it clearly. This wasn't about quitting the drug. This was about asking myself, what will I do with all this pain when it's not there to hold it for me? The light turned green. I didn't move. Cars behind me honked, their headlights bouncing in the rain. I wasn't frozen because of the traffic. I was frozen because I realized I'd spent years thinking the substance was the enemy, when the real enemy was what I was running from. I eased my foot onto the gas and drove past the corner, not fast, not slow, just steady enough to keep moving forward. My reflection in the rear view looked older than the last time I drove this road, not in years, but in miles of pain carried. Somewhere between the flicker of that neon light and the sound of my tires on wet asphalt, a thought rose in me that I couldn't shake. Maybe my addictions weren't trying to destroy me. Maybe they were trying to protect me from a world I didn't know how to survive in yet. The first seed didn't sprout in some dark alley or smoky room. It sprouted in my childhood bedroom. I can still see it, the walls covered in posters I didn't care about, a small desk littered with things that never really belonged to me, the faint smell of laundry detergent mixed with something older, stale air that had absorbed too many unspoken arguments, the kind of air that felt heavy even when you opened a window. In that room, I learned the art of holding my breath, not physically, but emotionally. I learned to hide the earthquake inside so well that people thought the ground beneath me was steady. When the world around me felt too big, too loud, too sharp, I would retreat there, close the door, and try to disappear into something, music, TV, daydreams, anything to dull the edge. I didn't know it then, but I was already rehearsing for the day a substance would offer me the same thing, an exit. Pain didn't just arrive one day like an uninvited guest. It grew slowly, dripping into my life through small cracks, a cutting comment here, a broken promise there. The moments weren't always huge or dramatic, but they accumulated like snow on a roof, each flake invisible until the weight became unbearable. By the time I reached my teens, I had learned 3 unshakable rules about survival. Don't let them see you weak. Find a way to turn off the noise inside. Never, ever depend on anyone to hold you. That last one, that was the dangerous one, because it meant that when I finally found something that could hold me, even in a twisted way, I clung to it with everything I had. The first time I drank, it wasn't at a wild party. It wasn't surrounded by strangers chanting my name. It was quiet, almost sacred. A friend handed me a bottle like they were passing me a key. "It'll help," they said. And it did. The warmth spread through me like a tide pulling away my shame. The chatter in my head slowed, each thought stepping back into the shadows. My body loosened. My breath found a rhythm that felt almost foreign. For the first time in years, I wasn't overthinking my existence. I was just there. I didn't fall in love with the substance. I fell in love with the silence it brought. From that day on, every painful moment carried a small secret solution in the corner of my mind. Panic attack, there's a way to stop it. Sleepless night, there's a way to escape it. Guilt, shame, loneliness, all of them had the same antidote. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't thrill-seeking. It was triage. And for a while, I told myself I was in control. I could still hold down a job, still smile in family photos, still make people laugh, but every smile felt like a borrowed mask, and every laugh had an echo of something hollow. The truth was, I wasn't trying to live. I was trying to outlast. The irony is, the very thing I thought was protecting me was also quietly stealing pieces of me. Not all at once, but in small withdrawals. A friendship here, a dream there, a little self-respect siphoned away each time I told myself, just one more, and then I'll quit. I remember one night, vividly. I was sitting alone in my car outside my apartment, the parking lot lit by a single flickering lamp. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the familiar need crawling under my skin. I stared at the small bag in my hand and thought, this is the only thing keeping me from falling apart tonight. And then, as I tipped it toward me, another thought broke through. What happens when even this doesn't work anymore? It was the first crack in the armor. It didn't happen all at once. There was no thunderclap, no cinematic moment where I threw everything away and swore never to touch it again. It started with a whisper. It was the night after that parking lot moment. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, back against the couch, the TV playing some late-night show I wasn't watching. The room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner, casting shadows that stretched and swayed with every movement I made. I held the bottle in my hand, but I didn't take a sip. I just stared at it. For the first time, I wasn't looking at it like an escape. I was looking at it like a photograph of someone I used to love, someone who had once saved me, but had also broken me in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. And then it hit me. I'm not fighting the addiction. I'm fighting myself. That realization was brutal, because it meant that if I wanted to win, I couldn't declare war on myself anymore. I had to make peace with the part of me that had reached for that drink, that pill, that high, not because I was bad, but because I was hurting. It felt strange at first, almost wrong. We're taught to hate our addictions, to label them as the enemy, to attack them until they're gone. But how do you destroy something that was, in its own flawed way, trying to save your life? I closed my eyes and pictured myself as a child, the younger me, the one who learned to hold his breath, to hide his panic, to stay silent when his heart was breaking. I saw him sitting alone in that small bedroom, staring at the floor, wishing someone would come in and notice. And I realized every time I used, I was trying to protect him. It didn't excuse the damage. It didn't erase the pain I'd caused others. But it made me see the truth. My addiction was not a monster born out of nowhere. It was a desperate coping mechanism, a flawed but powerful survival instinct. From that night forward, I stopped saying, I hate this part of me. Instead, I started saying, I understand why you did what you did. It's a strange kind of freedom, not the kind where chains fall off instantly, but the kind where you notice the lock has been broken all along and you've been holding the key in your hand. When I began to see my addiction as a signal instead of a sin, I started asking better questions. What is this craving trying to tell me right now? What feeling am I avoiding? What pain still feels too dangerous to face alone? And slowly, the need to numb became the need to heal. I won't lie to you, the craving still came, sometimes strong enough to make my body shake. But instead of shaming myself for feeling them, I'd sit with them like you sit with an old friend who's telling you the same sad story again. You don't have to agree with them, but you can listen. That's when I learned one of the most important truths of recovery. You can't out-hate a part of yourself into healing. You have to out-love it. The night I first chose to listen instead of escape, something shifted. I didn't pour the bottle down the sink. I didn't make any grand declarations. But I did put it away and sit with my pain for just one night. One night became two. Two became three. And then, somewhere down the line, the craving didn't feel like a command anymore. It felt like a question I didn't have to answer. I'm not telling you I became fearless. I'm telling you I became honest. And sometimes that's enough to change the entire game.